Hey phone dogs, BoHD here, and this is the Amazon Fire Phone, the first phone to introduce a one-of-a-kind 3D experience dubbed Dynamic Perspective. So let's take a closer look at this device and see if it's the phone for you. Now from a hardware standpoint, I think the phone looks very stylish. I mentioned that it looks very much like an iPhone, while some of you thought it looked like a Nexus 4. And yeah, I'd have to agree, it definitely has some Nexus and iPhone elements, such as the glossy reflective back cover and squared off edges. But if you take a look around the device, we'll see it has your volume controls and dedicated camera and firefly button on the left hand side, with nothing on the right hand side. And then there's the sleep on off button on the top next to the 3.5mm headphone jack and speaker port, and then you'll find the micro USB charging port and dual stereo speakers down below. The front of the Fire Phone is what is really unique in that it has 4 front-facing cameras that are used to detect the movements of your head to create that 3D experience I was talking about earlier. And I wouldn't say it makes the phone look any better. In fact, to the average consumer, they probably would look like 4 screws or bolts instead of cameras, but they are essential to the dynamic perspective mode. And so lastly, if we flip the phone over, we'll see that glossy back plate with a 13 megapixel camera and flash in the upper right hand corner. It is definitely a fingerprint magnet, but it looks good and feels premium in the hands. Now if we power on the phone, the first thing you will notice is some sort of 3D lock screen that really shows off the dynamic perspective mode, as it allows you to look around the screen as if you're looking through a window. So it's pretty neat and works pretty well, although some of the lock screens are very random. You will most likely have to search through them to find a lock screen that is decent to look at. But really the entire phone is tricked out to be viewed in 3D thanks to the software that makes every icon and even some text appear as 3D models. So really if you like 3D, you'll love the way this phone works, but if you don't, then really this phone is nothing special, especially since it only has a 720p display, which isn't bad, but now that phones in the similar price range are coming out with 2K res panels, a 720p res display just won't cut it anymore. Although with that said, I don't think the display is that bad. I mean, whites are white and colors appear to be very accurate without being too oversaturated, but the images could always be denser and more crisp. And since we know competing phones have higher res displays, naturally we as consumers are going to want what we don't have. Now really what makes the 3D dynamic perspective mode work is the software, so ultimately that is what is really the most unique and different aspect of this phone. And to be honest, it is a mess. I've never liked Amazon software simply because it is not simple. There's way too much going on, whether it be the recently visited apps that you can scroll through up on top, or the most visited websites down below that. And then you also have 4 apps that always remain at the bottom, but then if you swipe up, you get access to all your apps. And if that wasn't enough already, you get additional widgets and notifications when you either swipe from the right of the screen or shake your phone to the left. And then there's also another panel that swipes out to the right when you swipe in from the left or shake your phone to the right that gives you access to your apps, games, music, videos, and other various Amazon related categories. Oh, and I'm still not done. You also have additional settings when you swipe down from the top like you would on an Android device, where you can access more settings and toggle airplane mode on or off along with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. So basically what I'm trying to say is that this phone is complicated. Unless you're already familiar with the Fire OS, chances are you're going to have to spend a lot of time getting used to this layout of this operating system, because it's certainly not as simple as iOS or stock Android. Although I will say with all that said, it is very fluid and just as fast as some of the high-end Android devices in terms of how fast applications open and close. So in terms of performance, this OS performs great. It's just the structure of the OS that really needs some work. Also, since this is an Amazon phone, you will need to download all your apps from the Amazon App Store, so there is no Google Play services, meaning there's not as many apps. Whether it be games or utility apps, you're limited to the apps Amazon has and not much else. I mean, if you use a lot of Google services, you're basically out of luck because there's really no Google apps available that are created by Google. They're pretty much all made by third-party developers. And also I found that when playing YouTube videos, the picture is okay, thanks to that decent 720p display, but the sound is terrible. I mean, the quote-unquote stereo speakers on this phone sound terrible. You can probably get by watching some comedy skits or vlog-type YouTube videos on here, but music sounds terrible. You're definitely not going to want to watch any sort of music videos on this device. Now, if we take a look at the camera app, it's very straightforward in that you can switch between the 13 megapixel rear facing camera and 5 megapixel front facing camera and toggle the flash on or off up at the top. And in the settings, there's really only two key features you can toggle on or off, that being the HDR mode and the panorama mode. And that is really it. Now, Amazon does have this feature called Firefly, which people are calling the Shazam for objects, which basically means it is supposed to recognize the object you're pointing the camera towards and pair it up with an Amazon listing so that you can buy the object. But I say supposed to because it works for items in the store with barcodes and such, but it doesn't really do a very good job recognizing items that don't come in their original packaging. So it's a cool feature that can be useful, but only when it works. And so if you take a look at the pictures this camera produces, they are decent, but I noticed they tend to be very warm with a yellowish tint to some of them. They are also a tad bit blurry when you zoom in up close to the subject. I mean, for a 13 megapixel camera, it really shouldn't be all that blurry, so I'm hoping it can be fixed in a software update since it appears to be a software issue causing the camera to not focus correctly. But until it gets fixed, the camera is just so-so at best. And so before I wrap up this review, battery life might be the saving grace because with all the 3D features this phone has, the battery life is surprisingly long lasting. Standby time is good, and I've only had to charge this device a few times over the past week or so with moderate use. But if for some reason you can't get a full day of use out of it, Amazon has informed me that you can indeed turn off the 3D dynamic perspective mode on the Fire Phone by going to the settings and configuring the low motion controls under the display category. So if you turn off some of those features, I'm sure you can squeeze out some extra battery juice from this phone. And so overall, while there are still some unique features about the Amazon Fire Phone, unfortunately there's still a lot holding it back from competing with some of the higher end Android and Apple devices. I mean, the dynamic perspective mode is neat and the hardware makes the phone feel very premium and stylish, but the Fire Phone just completely fails at delivering an easy to use operating system, which is really one of the most important features of a phone. And since this device costs an upwards of $600 and it's exclusive to AT&T, I find it very hard to recommend this phone for you unless you are heavily invested in Amazon hardware, or you really only care about having a 3D phone and not much else. But hey, this is Amazon's first phone, so hopefully they'll learn what needs to be fixed and adjusted so they can rebound with a killer device next year. But right now, it's just not what it's supposed to be. And so with that said, that is my review of the Amazon Fire Phone. I'm BoHD from PhoneDog.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.